And I don't think education can change the world, but I do believe that it is one of the essential pillars to making this change. So when we think about measurement, I mean, ideally, I like to think of capacity, like, do young people now have the tools and resources to actually succeed? And oftentimes those tools and resources are internal. Do they have critical thinking skills? Do they have access to the levels of math that will get them real opportunity? Do they have literacy levels that will get them to write policy and get political and make change and start revolutions if we need to?
Hello and welcome to the Impact Insiders podcast, the podcast that explores real-life examples of people and organizations that are making an impact. My name is Sarah Nielsen, and I'm one of the managing directors at Relative Impact. Today, we are talking to Katie Brady about the role of education in achieving social equity. Katie is currently the Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning at Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, also known as SEO, in New York City. She is completing her Master's of Education in Education Leadership, Policy and Change through the University of Cape Town, and she is also the founder of an education NGO in northern Malawi. I'm also very honored to call her one of my best friends. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Katie Brady. Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Hi, Sarah. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So you worked on an education project in South Africa with us a couple of years ago, but I know that was just one small chapter in your career. So I'm glad you're here to share more about your experiences and your perspectives on the impact of education in social equity. And you and I met when we were both volunteering at a school in Cape Town. So who would have thought that 5 years later we'd be here on this podcast together?
I know, it's crazy. I still remember the day I met you at the school. It was like a government school, and we were on the playground. And one of the kids were like, you should really meet this girl, Sarah. She's a lot like you. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll meet the other North American lady. Fine. And here we are.
So right now you're completing your Master's of Education. Can you tell us what your thesis is on?
My master's itself has been based on how does education play a role in community change through policy and through like leadership decisions. So my research kind of came to action after the murder of George Floyd in the United States at the hands of the police in 2020. After that happened, I'm sure we all saw across the world, different organizations were coming out with anti-racist policies. I remember getting emails from my grocery store saying, now we are taking on an anti-racist policy, right, amidst like the Black Lives Matter movement and whatnot. And this was really coming to light in various school districts in my hometown and where I'm from, up in New Jersey in the United States. And I noticed that in some schools in which I used to teach, they now were being celebrated for leading the way in anti-racist education. But while I was teaching there was so many issues that my students of color were voicing in terms of feeling like marginalized by administration and staff and, being treated unfairly, not being put into high-level honors classes when they belonged there, but instead like the white kids would get there, or like unfairly being disciplined in harsh ways that their white counterparts were not. So I became curious with the idea of how are these schools with so much like racist concerns and troubles going on, how are they the ones leading the way in anti-racism? So my research itself is going into these school districts that claim to be practicing anti-racist policy, and I'm focusing on how school leaders understand what that anti-racism is. So I'm looking at it through what's called a non-performative lens, which comes up sometimes that we see across the world in policies, where sometimes because there's a policy for it and language for an organization to say something's going on, in fact, nothing really changes. They could just kind of hide behind the fact that they have a policy. So I'll be exploring how these school leaders understand anti-racism, if at all, and what do those changes actually look like in real life beyond just the policy itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I've had the pleasure of getting updates from you throughout the process of it. So I've really enjoyed learning what you're working on and discussing the different findings. So I think that's an incredible topic to be exploring. And
Yeah,
alongside that, you are also the senior manager of teaching and learning at SEO. So what's SEO all about?
oh my gosh, this is my dream job, by the way. SEO is we offer a free 8-year college access and college success program to kids of color in New York City, so in the 5 boroughs. And what that means is we start our scholars in 9th grade when they enter high school, and we offer additional learning opportunities that the public school system in New York City is not offering. So we offer really advanced English and writing courses, really advanced math, like they go up to trigonometry by like sophomore year. And this is through after school programs and Saturday school and a summer academy. In addition to our learning pieces, we offer experiential learning trips. So we send our scholars like around the world to learn how to cook in Italy, or learn about climate change in the Philippines, or learn how to speak Spanish in Argentina or something. So they get opportunities to actually get out there in the world. And through this as well, we undertone it with social emotional learning and anti-oppressive pedagogy that we keep at the fore in all of our classes. It's wonderful. I get the opportunity or the pleasure of managing about 100 of our teachers in this space and training them in social emotional learning, in the anti-racist, anti-oppressive pedagogies that we talk about. So we kind of are like leading the way in this kind of professional development and opportunity for the teachers and ultimately the kids.
I love that so much. And so, you're doing that, you're finishing your master's, you run an NGO in Malawi. I praise you for all that you do.
Thank you.
And so you started your career as a high school English teacher, and then transitioned, started studying development, and transitioned into the development side of education, working outside of the classroom and the kind of more traditional education spaces, working outside of that. So what would you say have been some of your key learnings during that transition?
Oh, this is a great question. I'm sure no matter what I say, like I'm going to be leaving out some big ones, but I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is the idea that you need to listen in the space of that you're trying to make change. As change makers, whether that's an educator, whether that's a policymaker, a leader, a manager, whatever they may be, you're almost inevitably put in a position of power. And with those positions of power, we feel as if our voice or rather our word is like final. But starting in just the classroom, I really recognize the need for me to switch the power hierarchy and not be the only voice of reason or the final voice, and rather like give power and like space to share with my scholars, like with my young people. And then when I started working in Malawi, which at the time was just my summer vacations and then like managing from afar, I came in, and to be honest, like I had a lot of ignorance. I came in with a good heart that I think most foreign entities do in charitable spaces, but I didn't know enough about the culture and community. And because I'm from America, because I'm in education, I thought I knew like, oh yeah, well, we have good schools, so maybe if they did this that I learned in America, this would help. But I didn't realize that things that foreigners may think are like not so fortunate are actually intentional. And some things are really beautiful and offer way more than what I ever experienced in my education and my upbringing. So I realized that in order to do it right, I had to partner with locals in the community. I had to partner with organizations and spaces that already existed to make change, and then see and ask how I can actually help and contribute. I can't lead the way in that change because I will never know what it's like to be a Malawian or to be in that community itself. So I realized the value in listening and then seeing what they needed. And they needed my voice on the international level. They needed me, right? They have the great ideas. Maybe they need funding, or they wanted certain trainings they weren't able to get access to. So then I was able to go back to America and utilize my networks and my connections there to bring it to Malawi. And same again, sorry to keep going, but like when I'm studying at University of Cape Town, and first I studied development and I got my degree there, I realized how little I knew. I had a great education in America, but it's very limited and very like Eurocentric and colonial, if we can put it that way. And I almost had to deconstruct my thinking to listen more to the communities in which I was trying to serve. And I think through there, am I actually able to make change or any kind of real impact? Yeah.
And your time studying at University of Cape Town, it wasn't just, from what I remember, all in the classroom. You were out in communities working at different schools, right? So I'm sure that really helped with that process as well.
It was so incredibly eye-opening and beneficial. I also like started working at the university itself, and I was training young teachers. And when young teachers were placed in the classroom, I got to go travel to these schools and observe them teaching and give feedback and coach them, support them in those spaces. And, you know, I got to see what the fancy foreign private schools were through that space, but I also got to be in government schools that were like very much underfunded and had 60 kids in the classroom and, you know, no technology and stuff. And then having to help these teachers learn how to best educate those scholars. So yeah, I got to be in the communities and I got to really hear from the educators and the kids in these spaces. That was really valuable.
Mm-hmm. And I know you used to visit Malawi quite frequently, and you know, because of COVID and such, you haven't been able to as frequently as you probably would like, but the program's still running. So I think that is just testament to the, you know, community ownership and leadership that you've helped build, and speaks to the sustainability of the program without you needing to be there. So I think that's worth.
You're right. I mean, that was my goal. My goal was, fortunately, I have a partner named Vincent. He's from the exact township in which we worked and we studied, and the kids of which we support. And a lot of my work there was like helping Vincent get access to managerial skills and giving him like kind of the tech resources to be able to troubleshoot in the way I would have, and better, because of course he's from there and has the context. And I kept saying, like, my goal is that you don't need me at all. My goal is that, first of all, I guess my long-term goal is that there is no need for educational support in nonprofit organizations, because education is just good internationally and universally, but we're not there yet. So then my real goal is that they don't need me as a foreigner coming in, and that they had the resources and the tools to support. And I can confidently say right now that Vincent and the team on the ground are managing it so well. Our kids are finishing their education, they're getting additional support, and they're really leading the way in their own schools. So it's working well, and they don't need me. Like, I'm no one at this point. They can lead the way themselves.
That's incredible. And when we look at the power that education has in achieving social equity, I mean, it's very complex. So how do you think that change, that impact, can be measured?
I think years ago, I would have had a more clear answer, but I don't know if it would have been seeing the whole picture. So I want to almost backpedal. Like, thinking about how change and impact can be measured in education, I think there's almost too many voices on this topic. Some would say it's through test scores. Some would say it's through like the GDP of a country at large. But I also very much believe that change and impact comes at the social emotional level. It comes at community support. And when I think about, it's funny, when I went back to grad school, I went into social development and I thought I was leaving education. But then the more I learned about social development and poverty solutions in like the global South, I kept coming back to education, and I realized I can't leave education. It's who I am, and it's what I fundamentally believe. And I don't think education can change the world, but I do believe that it is one of the essential pillars to making this change. So when we think about measurement, I mean, ideally, I like to think of capacity. Like, do young people now have the tools and resources to actually succeed? And oftentimes those tools and resources are internal. Do they have critical thinking skills? Do they have access to the levels of math that will get them real opportunity? Do they have literacy levels that will get them to write policy and get political and make change and start revolutions if we need to? So when I think about change, I am still thinking holistic. The letter A makes what sound, and then the kids go but they don't actually get the opportunity to have a pen in their hand and make an A, and they're forced to string a word together. So if you think about, basic need, I think those things need to be met. The kids need to be well fed when they arrive at school and be able to have food throughout the day so they can learn. They need to be able to have writing utensils and pen and paper. The teachers need these resources. They need to be well paid, and then they're going to show up and everyone's going to be there on time. So I think at the foundational level, that needs to start first. And then I think once those needs are met, we can start talking about what's vital in the classroom or what vital learnings can be taught. I noticed that in some rural communities, a lot of the teaching is agricultural and more like environmental science, which is really important in these communities. And those are the people that are feeding the rest of the world. So I do think that's important. But I think it's also essential that we try not to just pigeonhole the curriculum that kids get taught based on where they are. I mean, growing up in like suburban America, they were like, do you want to be a science kid or an English kid? Or right, you have like the idea that you can be anything. I would love to see that mentality expressed throughout the world. So I'd like to see more sciences and math and literacy being taught that isn't just Eurocentric. I'd love people to be able to see and learn in terms of the humanities of people of color and revolutions that grew from on the ground work and community. So, we talk about this in academia as like decentering whiteness in the classroom and decentering like capitalism and control and making it more community-based, because the resources are there, the success stories are there, the people are there, but oftentimes in the classrooms, they're not learning about their own people. They're not learning about people that have actually succeeded. So I'd love to see more of that. And I think then we start getting into the conversation of anti-racism and anti-oppression. And that's kind of where it starts.
And so in terms of, the curriculum, the books, the resources, whether that's funds for salaries, whether that's funds for textbooks or food to make sure children are well fed, that's on the organizational government level. In terms of teachers and school leaders, how can they play their part in achieving social equity?
Yeah, wonderful. I think it's before we can think of teachers. I'm glad you brought in school leaders, because school leaders, I use that term vaguely because it's like we have different names for it in different schools around the world, right? Some call it principals, some call it headmasters, some call it directors or deans. So whatever the school leader title may be, they set the culture in the community and funding, or if they don't create the funding, but they allocate. So I think it's really essential to think through, how do we be creative with our money and what has the most impact? So what directly helps the scholars the best? And that needs to be the center focus, and not necessarily pleasing external stakeholders like a board or donors or something. Like, we need to focus primarily on what's serving the kids. And that comes from asking them. And again, coming back to listening to their voice. The kids and their families know what they need to grow. So I think rather than boards and external organizations or public-private partnerships of other people coming in, we need to actually listen to the people we're serving. And then they can start making decisions. So listening is a big part of it. Putting autonomy in the teachers and trusting that different teachers have different styles and they offer different contributions to the classroom, and celebrating what is possible and allowing them to do their thing rather than micromanage is really important. Not to say I don't think teachers should be evaluated. I very much do. But I think there's different indicators of what effective instruction is than just test scores and just like following a script. It's love and it's care and it's asking questions and coming back to that idea of putting power in the kids. So flipping a hierarchy upside down, I think. The kids should be the ones learning how to make decisions and learning how to work together and leading discussions and asking questions. Shouldn't always be like teacher-centered, which is what we see a lot. So I know I'm kind of talking vaguely, but I'm thinking of this like hierarchy of where the money's coming to the school leader and then to the teacher. And I think if we really study anti-oppression and questioning power structures, I think then we'll start to really see young people learning how to take control of their own destiny and take control of their learning and have learning be something that's working for them and not just like putting them into a certain hole that they can form into an existing society, and rather let them be the ones to figure out how to fix our society, because we're not there. We don't know what we're doing. We've already done our best in our generations and above, but I think by teaching the kids how to think and question and push boundaries and challenge each other and come together, then they're going to be the ones that really make the change we want to see.
100%. Thank you, Katie. You and I have these conversations quite frequently, so it's nice that we're now able to share one with the world or with whoever's listening to this.
Yes, thank you. It's such a pleasure. I'm just so grateful to be able to speak with you, and I think the work that you do at Relative and just like throughout your career really helps me organize these large ideas that I have in my head and that I've learned in academic space, and be able to put it into, like, we do need measurement. We do need tangible ways of understanding change. And too often people, especially leaders of organizations or people that get lost in the dream, and then we lose track of how to practically make it happen on the ground. So I really appreciate the work you do and the organizations that you work with to make sure that the actual work's getting done. Everyone has different missions, but together the mission is equity and peace. And I think together we can make that happen.
100%. Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate what you've just said, and I appreciate you joining me today. We will include all of the links and references we discussed today in the episode show notes. This has been an Impact Insiders podcast powered by Relative Impact. Please subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss future episodes. For more information about Relative Impact and the work we're doing, please check out our website and sign up to our newsletter to get updates directly to your inbox.